Greetings, everybody. My name is Jeff Engelstad, and I am a professor of the practice here at the University of Denver in the Burns School of Real Estate and Construction Management. And as a professor of the practice, I am supposed to keep one foot firmly planted in the industry. And so, what I want to talk to you about today is something that I'm working on currently, which is a low income housing tax credit development for seniors. So, just want to talk to you just a little bit about this. Just kind of for fun, if nothing else. It's like LIHTC development. LIHTC stands for Low Income Housing Tax Credit. LIHTC development is really a different type of development. The metrics don't work. A regular market rate development metrics don't work for low income housing and vice versa and things like that. But it's very interesting and I really like it. I mean, it's a really cool program because here's what we've got in Colorado is that we have, Colorado is a great place to live. It's a great place to be, but it's also super expensive. And it really puts the squeeze on low income communities and especially senior low income communities. And so what I'm doing currently with some other folks is we are looking at doing a development up in north of Denver in for a senior community. I'm being a little guarded with the exact location and everything because it's an active project. It really is an active project. In fact, we are just now going through Planning Commission and City Council, and I will tell you things are not going terribly well. With the Planning Commission, we've got a neighborhood group that is very, very much opposed to us, and things like this. And so, I don't want to spill all the beans at this point. But what I feel like we're doing is really are investing in seniors. In order for a LIHTC project to get the federal credits, it's got to remain affordable for at least 40 years. I'm supposed to talk for maybe 20 minutes. And it would take me, a couple hours to go through and the kind of the, how the program really works and things like that. The tax credits are a 15-year program. But in order to get awarded the tax credits, you usually have to extend the land use. And so there's called a land use restriction agreement or a LURA that you have to enter into that extends that affordability out to at least 40 years. And sometimes basically into perpetuity, which is okay because it's the benefit of the program is you are providing high quality, low cost housing for seniors. People have to be over the age of 55, an annual income below $39,000. And where we're building this, I guess I'm giving away some locational information here in Larimer County, is, there's a whole lot of people that fit the bill. These senior low-income housing tax credit developments have very big wait lists. I mean, they basically open up full, and that never changes. Let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing here. Here's our site. Our site's about 1.5 acres-ish, which is not a terribly big site. And what we were originally proposing was 60 plus units, and we could fit that podium. We could fit that on this site. Then we went down from there down to about 51 units. And now we're at about 48 units so that we can get a little more green space and things like that. One of the benefits we can build a 3-story building, and we don't require much parking because of the land use restriction for this to be senior low income housing, where the parking requirement is cut basically in half. And so that really works. The affected neighborhood are some very, very nice townhomes, really very nice. And of course they don't want this. Nobody ever wants it. And especially if you say low income, like nobody wants it, okay? NIMBY, not in my backyard. Well, and then they talk about traffic. Well, you're gonna put too much traffic on this Split Rock Drive here and things like that, because here was the primary access. Well, we solved that problem by negotiating with the landowner over here to have our primary access be over on this bigger road, Carlisle, and then looping through our property here and having this be just an emergency access with bollards and everything. And so the argument of you're going to have a bunch of people driving down this street doesn't hold up anymore, right? And so that was a good thing, and that is part of what we learned and part of what we negotiated when we started talking to the neighbors over a year ago on this project. These projects also take a really long time. Building height, the current code, what is approved on the site is retail with a little bit of residential. And what we're trying to do is basically build about the same mass, maybe just a little bit more in terms of mass, but all residential, right? And so the site, the reason I was attracted to the site in the first place is that I look at myself as a land packager. I want to buy a site. I want to acquire a site that is not zoned correctly, so that I can change the use and change the entitlements and then do something with it, right? And this was mostly retail, and it's not a terribly good retail site. Now there's retail right here. There's a coffee shop right there with a drive-through and everything, and that's okay. But this site here, because of the challenged access, is really a poor retail site, in my opinion. And that's why it's been sitting there for, a very long time. So anyway, we'll be able to build this thing and maintain that 40-foot height restriction. Some other things I wanted to show you here. I just pulled out a couple slides that we were doing with the Planning Commission. Is the big argument, which is, it becomes an unsaid argument when you're dealing with a homeowner group, with a NIMBY group, is that they think that a low-income project is going to destroy their property values. That's always the big argument. They don't want to admit it. They don't want to say it, but that's what they're thinking, right? In the first meeting, when they're honest, that's what they say. They're like, "Oh, you can't do this. It's gonna be the end of all good things." And there's been study after study that show there's really no conclusive evidence that being near a proximate to a low-income project that it's going to destroy your property values. In fact, there's a lot of them say just the opposite. And this, by the way, is a senior project. And so, it's got completely different dynamics as far as that goes as well. So anyway, that's kind of the big thing that you're up against as a developer. And one of the things you're always up against as a developer is you're changing the status quo. And people don't like that. People are like, we like it the way it is. It's a field. We like that field. It's like, well, that's not really sustainable. I mean, this needs to be developed, and it needs to be developed into something that will fit with the scale of the rest of the development around there, and will fit with the needs of the city, and will fit within the comprehensive plan document of the city and things like that. And if you don't want anything to go up next to you, I guess you have to protect your flank and buy the ground yourself or something, but that's kind of the way it goes. Let me tell you a little bit about how LIHTC works. This was born out of the Reagan administration, the 1986 Tax Reform Act. And the idea was we need high quality, low income housing. And the idea was it would give a tax credit to investors for this low income housing. And it's a dollar for dollar credit. And so you buy tax credits, and who buys the tax credits are going to be the banks under their Community Reinvestment Act. So it was all set in motion, not on purpose. First, in 1977, you've got the Community Reinvestment Act, which says, hey, you're a local bank. You need to be reinvesting in your local community. You can't just take all your proceeds and invest them in New York or something like this. And so what are you going to do? You're going to have bake sales. You're going to, how are you going to really do this? And the banks really struggled with it. Well, along comes the LIHTC program. And this was a way for banks to be able to invest their CRA funds in the local community. And it was easy for them. It was easy for them to do it. It was an easy vehicle. And it was a tremendous need. And so that's the idea about banks investing in LIHTC. What I want to show you is kind of the way it works as a financing mechanism. I'll show you the first, just the capital stack, and then we'll jump into a spreadsheet. I can show you a little bit more, maybe a little more detail. I think I'm losing track of my time anyway, but whatever. And so here, there are two programs. There's 9% and 4%. There's a whole lot more to this than we're going over in 15, 20 minutes, but we're doing a 9% competitive application. What it's going to end up with is you've got this amount of equity. Look at that. There's your equity, and here's your debt. And so totally flipped. These things come in about 70% equity and about 30% debt. Usually a project would come in about the opposite of that, about 70% debt and 30% equity. Now, the other thing about this is your equity partner who came with all this money, they don't want it back. They don't need it back. Their benefit is in the tax credit. This is your big tax credit equity, this green piece right here. That is like having a partner that is putting in this much capital into your project and does not require a return. 9.9 million out of this $16 million kind of hypothetical stack here. And then you fill in the rest of it because you've got your mortgage loan, and then you've got your tax credit equity, and then you got to go looking for the ways to fill the gap. That's the real fun part of this: finding loans, finding grants, and deferring part of your development fee, and all this sort of stuff in order to get that done. So anyway, there's the 9% deal. I want to show you that in a spreadsheet. Because for those of you who know me, I like spreadsheets. And for those of you who have not met yet, you will soon learn that I love spreadsheets. Everything is a spreadsheet. I communicate better with spreadsheets than I do with PowerPoint. And so let's take a look at this real quick. I'm going to go through this. I'm going to go through this super fast. But, and if anybody's interested in more of this, I'm happy to meet with you offline, whatever. But here is just an example. And again, it's a 9% conventionally financed LIHTC deal. And we are going to pay $2 million for some land. And then we're going to have our construction hard costs and our soft costs. And some of the things are eligible and some things are ineligible as far as our LIHTC basis. But skip that for now. Here's what and again, this is not the current deal, but it's a similarly sized deal, and it's about $15.5 million in total uses. Now, how do we come up with this low-income housing tax credit allocation? Take the total project cost minus the land and the ineligible costs. There are certain certain things that are not eligible. And I have some, I have a list of them somewhere, but anyway, there's certain things that you cannot get reimbursed with the credit. So we've got an eligible basis of $12 million. And then if we were in a difficult to develop area or a qualified census tract, QCT, DDA, and then you could maybe get something called basis boost, which would go up, take this 100 to 130%, which would mean that would increase your qualified basis, which would increase your annual tax credit. But anyway, we'll dispense with that for now and say we've got $12 million of basis times 9% is our $1 million roughly annual tax credit. We can sell that at maybe 92 cents on the dollar. This is the other part of this, is the tax credit pricing will vary. It can go down. In fact, there was one point where it went down into the 70 cents range. Well, then it's really hard to do a deal. There's been other times when it's been over $1. It's like banks will pay $1.05 for $1's worth of credit. Well, why do they do that? Because they really need the credit at that point, right? But, kind of a normal market, 92 to 96 cents on the dollar. And so think about it, it's not that great an investment, but that's why the banks are doing it. And that produces a tax credit of about $1 million, multiply it by 10, because that's the term, that's the tax credit term. restriction has to be at least 15. And we said, it's going to be 40, but the term is 10 years. So you take your $1 million times 10, you get $10 million. There's your tax credit equity, right? So there's your tax credit equity. And then these are basis soft costs, and these are non-basis. So these are things that you don't get to count. Some underwriting, some credit enhancements, bond consultants, things like that. You spend money on those things, you don't get to recover that in the tax credit. Now let's take a look and see how it works. Start to look like a regular real estate deal. You've got your $15.5 million total project costs. We've got 75 units in this case, and let's say they're all affordable. And we then run through a mix. We are going to rent some of our units to people that make as much as 80% of the AMI, the area median income. We're also going to rent some of our units to people who only make 20 or 40% of the area median income. And the bulk of our rents will be right in here, the 60s and 50s. And so that if the area median income is, $75,000, well, then, we're looking at people that make a lot less than that in order to qualify to live here. Where else do I want to go with this? Some of that gets a little more complicated than we care about. And so now here's all of our rents, our LIHTC rents, and we add them all up. And so we've got a total monthly rent of $77,000, and we'll say we'll have a 7% stabilized vacancy. Now it really is going to start looking like a real estate deal. Here's our potential income of less than $1 million. Remember, this is a $15 million program. That doesn't seem like that makes much sense. Minus the vacancy is our effective income, minus the expenses and the reserves gets us our net operating income of $287,000. So $287,000 on 15 million would be a really lousy cap rate. $287,000 net operating income divided by your total project cost of $15.5 million is less than a 2% cap rate. Nobody in their right mind would ever do that, right? And so, but nobody is going to do that. We have this NOI that will support some type of a loan. If we use a 5.5% interest rate, 35-year amortization, and 1.2 debt coverage ratio, we end up with a mortgage amount of $3.7 million, which this NOI will support. Right? So there's our first mortgage loan. Remember that capital stack. Then we have the tax credit equity of about 10 million. So we have in really round numbers, we have a $15 million deal. We have $10 million in tax credit equity, and we've got $3.7 million in the first mortgage. So we've got 13 million and we need 15.5. We've got a couple $1 million that we still have to come up with. Once we have the NOI and the annual debt service, then we'll have a little cash flow. So there will be a little cash flow on this. And that cash flow is going to go first to pay off the deferred developer fee, because the important piece of this is the sources and uses gap. There's our mortgage, there's our tax credit equity. And now what we got to do is we got to fill this up. We can get up to $10,000 per unit from the Division of Housing. That's usually the first place you're going to go to. You can get a city grant. Maybe we would get a city grant or something like this. Maybe we'd get a subordinate loan, a soft loan from an institution, something like that. Maybe we so we get private loans, private grants, municipal loans, municipal grants, that sort of stuff to kind of fill this up. I see I've got a negative gap here, which I think is actually a good thing. So what if I make that 420? Yeah, I got a little bit of a negative gap there, but anyway, doesn't matter. The negative gap is not a problem. It's just warning that, it needs to be zero. You'd have to massage that number so that you get this down to zero. And then you can't defer more than half of your development fee. And when you defer half your development fee, you got to be able to pay that amount back by using 13 years of the cash flow, of the static cash flow. So anyway, that's what it looks like. It's super, super complicated. It is, it's also a beauty contest because it's a competitive program and you don't know if you're going to win. And so you go through and you tie up the land and you spend a bunch of money on entitlements. And then you go in through the CHFA process and you spend a bunch of money on consultants and this, that, and the other thing, and you may not be approved. And if you're not approved, then maybe you start over and do it again next year. Or maybe you just lit a bunch of money on fire, and which is absolutely not fun. So try not to do that. I'm trying not to do that, but I'm not sure. It's touch and go right now on the current deal. So anyway, hopefully that's interesting. I think that's probably way more than you needed for 20 minutes. Maybe I'll try something else. I'll do something else. It might be a little bit easier to follow. But anyway, again, it's Jeff Ingolstadt. For those of you who I have not met, I'm definitely looking forward to that coming up this next quarter. So talk to you later. Bye-bye.